Hello, I was watching a recent live stream that Tommy Grunwald did, and he was trying to figure out the path of the April 8th eclipse if it was on a flat Earth. If you haven't seen it, I'd suggest that you go watch it. It's very interesting. He tried and ultimately failed, as one would expect, but he gave me a few good ideas on how I could approach this if I were to do this myself. The real trick is trying to get flat earthers to commit to any specific unit of measure when it comes to the sun and or the moon. Trying to get these answers out of them almost feels like trying to pull a pig out of a vat of Vaseline. So we just have to assume a few things on our own, and if they don't like that, well, too bad. They had the opportunity to give us some values. So the first trick is to locate where the sun is, and from that, make a few additional assumptions like how high is the moon, and if we know how high the moon is and how high it is relative to the sun, can we calculate the size of the moon? Or if we assume the moon is a certain size, can we calculate how high it is based on the shadow cast by the eclipse? So the trick is to come up with a few numbers, and near the end of the stream, Tommy was saying that he heard flat earthers say that the size of the sun is about 32 miles in radius and that it's about 3,000 miles up. And so we can start using that to get an idea of how big everything else is. So thanks to this, we can assume that the width of the totality of the eclipse is going to be 115 miles wide. And so the first trick is to calculate the slope. If the sun is giving off light in all different directions and there is this opaque object between the sun and the observer, that is going to cast a shadow of a certain diameter on the surface of the Earth. From there, we can figure out what the slope is. We know the diameter of the totality. According to flat earthers, the sun should be 32 miles in diameter. So if we take the radius, which is half the diameter of the sun, we take the radius of the eclipse totality, which is half the width of it. With just a little bit of geometry, we can calculate what the shadow slope is. From there, we can calculate the height of the sun's point source. Once we have the height of the sun's point source, now we have one of two options. We can either calculate how high the moon is by figuring out what the diameter of the moon is and assuming that value, or we can assume a certain height of the moon, and from that we should be able to calculate the moon's diameter. Very simple, basic geometry. And that's what I did the other night to confirm the viability of this side little project. I wanted to create an animation to give people a very quick and easy visual description of how things should work one way or the other. And so the multi-projection clock app that I had written is capable of calculating the various GPs for the sun and the moon and various other objects. I just focused on the sun and the moon, starting at the time that the moon should cast a shadow on the Earth, all the way to the point where the moon is no longer casting a shadow on the Earth in 12-second increments. I then calculated the sun's GP, the moon's GP, and column F and G ended up being where I calculated the center position of the totality on the Earth's surface. And column G, you can see, is in red, and I kind of messed up. I had to fix these slightly when the moon's right ascension was greater than the sun's right ascension, and then after that, everything was proper. So column H is derived from column G by fixing column G. So I don't bore everybody right away. I'm going to play the animations that I created from this data set. The first is going to be how the path of the eclipse should really happen on a flat Earth, which, as you can see, doesn't work at all. After that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show on the map where the sun and the moon should be to cast the shadow where it's observed, going on the assumption that the sun's GP is correct, and from there calculate where the moon should be. And I don't want the moon to be 1,000 miles above the surface, so I made the moon's height 3 sun diameters below the sun, and then from there I was able to figure out where it should be on the map and also how big it should be based on that fixed height. Then there's another animation I made, which is very similar to the last one. Given a fixed moon diameter, how high from the surface of the Earth does the moon have to be? And then the last animation is where I added stereo mode for the AE map. And this is going to be like all of the other recent ones that I made, which is far wall or parallel projection type focusing. So now that we've got those out of the way, let's go back to the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet, by the way, I'm going to make available. Check the description below. You'll be able to check all my math based on the computed geocoordinates. The next thing I did was I calculated the X and Y position of the sun on the flat Earth map. Same thing with the moon, and same thing with the center of eclipse totality. I then calculated the moon's delta relative to the eclipse GP. I also calculated the difference between the eclipse geolocation and the sun's GP. I calculated the hypotenuse between the observer on the ground and where the center of the sun should be. I forget exactly why I put these 2 columns. They may not be necessary, but you could probably ignore those. After that, I wanted to calculate the moon's X and Y position, its diameter, and its moon height. And when I was reviewing to make this video, I realized that I might have not got the exact position correct for one or the other mode, but the math for these are here. Then I calculated the moon's position on the AE map relative to the North Pole so that I could then take these coordinates and convert them back into latitude and longitude positions for the moon to calculate its GP. I've included these other sets of calculations which are strictly flat Earth, and this group are the outputs of all of those calculations, which I then used in my app to generate the animations. This group here was just a placeholder so that I could calculate either this set of moon coordinates or grab the original that came from my Flat Earth Clock app. Similar for the moon height, similar for the diameter. Here you can see that it's hard-coded to 34.656. I believe it was this value that I had calculated here. Or this one, which would be the dynamic moon diameter based on the fixed height. So on and so forth. So these here are just basically example formulas that I could just paste into all of these or these or these to switch whichever mode so that whenever I created my script, it would act accordingly. And then this is a copy of the eclipse lat long coordinates that I then put into a different file that would draw the path of the totality. That's going to be it for now. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, I would appreciate the thumbs up, the subscribe, comment below, and all of that other good YouTube stuff. And I'm going to see you again in another video at some point soon enough. So bye for now.